Hi, it's Pastor Robin here, pastor of Metropolitan Community Church of Richmond, and my home study a couple of days after our worship on September 19th, bringing you a few highlights and continuing this series, Living the Good Life. And the question that I raised this week was, how much do you owe? And that question comes out of our gospel reading from Luke chapter 16, the first few verses, in which Jesus tells the parable of the manager, the dishonest manager, some would say the shrewd manager, who cheats his employer, a rich man. And the rich man, the employer, finds out about it and fires him. But the manager knows that he can't possibly make a living working an honest day's work, so he decides that before the people who owe his boss money find out he's been fired, he goes around and tells them, give me your bill, your debt to my boss, and he cuts it in half or cuts it by a third, earning the gratitude of those people who owe the rich man money. His reasoning is that when they find out that he's no longer important, that he's no longer the manager who has this power, that indeed they will favor him and give him favors and help him survive when he doesn't have a job. And, you know, we often get in situations like that. Too often, I suspect. Sometimes somebody does us a favor and it feels good and we say thank you, but then we realize actually they're looking for more than thank you. They had an agenda. Sometimes we may have done that ourselves. I know I've done it a few times and I don't like the feeling, but I've done it anyway. And so we create these debts of obligation, this kind of strings attached to something that we otherwise would have done just for the goodness of it. And, you know, it's very different with God. God gives us these enormous gifts of life. We owe it all to God. None of this, we wouldn't have anything without God. We owe it all to God. But God doesn't create an obligation. See, God puts us first, and then really the only thing that we can do, in a sense, to respond is to put God first, which is why we pay our tithes and offerings up front, off the first fruits of our labor, not later on, not after everything else is taken care of. But we don't do that out of a sense of obligation or debt or burden created. We do it out of the sense of thank you, of real gratitude, that we really are, like, this is an extraordinary kind of thing that we have received from God. And God doesn't foreclose. God doesn't have late fees. God doesn't refuse to speak to us if our account is overdrawn. Oh, no, no. God works on the free principle of gifts and wants us to actually use them. That's actually the point. We're not paying God back. We never can pay God back for everything we've received. That's impossible. What we do is we pay God forward. We pay the work of God forward through the work of the church and other good causes and institutions. We actually pay God's investment in us out into the wider community. And so that's very different than the manager who put it all on himself. It's all about me. Obviously, that's what he believed. So he was just looking out for number one. We realize that we're not number one. God is number one. But that is true not only for us as individuals, it is also true for us as a church. You see, our church, we don't exist just for ourselves. The church doesn't exist actually for those of us who are in it. The church actually exists, I believe, because God has put us there to do work to help other people. You know, to actually heal those who've been broken. In fact, I believe the mission of MCC Richmond, the vision we must have for ourselves, is that this is the vision that God's given me anyway, that we are a community that has been called together to actually help the spiritually abused, the spiritually disenfranchised, the people who've been turned away, the people who've been told they're not worth anything. And this isn't limited to LGBT people, although that is our core community of accountability from our history as part of the global MCC movement. But when we say in MCC, we're going to tear down walls and build up hope, that's what we're here for. But not just for ourselves, but for the whole of our community. And that's the whole of Richmond or the Central Virginia community, not just the LGBT community, although it's important to stay in touch and be connected there. So we have to build relationships with each other and with others who are coming in to help them find their connection with the loving God and reconnect and strengthen that thing that they may have lost or had taken away from them by other parts of religion. I want to tell you a little bit of a story. I told the group, the congregation the other morning, and that involves a call I received back in June from a young woman who asked me to marry her and her partner. And as we talked a little bit, I realized that her partner was male and that they were looking for a legal same or opposite gender or different gender, heterosexual marriage. So I said to her, oh, I certainly do that, but I want you to know that the church I serve has a primary history in the gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender community, and usually I do more same-gender weddings than I do different gender weddings or heterosexual weddings. She said, I know that, that's why I'm calling you, because we want to be married by a religious leader and in a community that actually understands that everyone is part of God's realm and the entire community is welcome. She said, we want to be married in a church that lets God be God and doesn't set up a lot of rules that God has to jump through and other people have to jump through in order to connect with God. And I said to myself, wow, that's our vision right there. We're the church that wants to, and it practices letting God be God so that everybody, all God's people, are welcome. And that really is an important thing for us to understand. So if you believe, as I do, that we owe it all to God, then in our personal lives, we pay God forward. And in our community life at MCC Richmond, we pay it forward as well. Now, this coming Sunday, continuing this series, Living the Good Life, I'm going to talk more about, have you picked out your pattern yet? How have you organized your life? Do you have a pattern? Do you have a way of living that actually leads to contentment? I hope you'll join me for that next Sunday, 10:45 at MCC Richmond on September 26th. But if you can't, then tune in here next week. And if you want to hear the whole sermon that I preached last Sunday or the one I will preach this coming Sunday, check it out on www.mccrichmond.org. Until we meet again, wherever that may be, may your day be blessed and may your life be filled with God's joy.